Hello and welcome back to TBWP 21. This month we are focusing on financial wellness with all the uncertainties and trials we have experienced throughout the last year of this pandemic. The financial well-being of American citizens has been a hot topic around the world.
Although TanaBell was fortunate enough to not have to issue layoffs, we still understand that some of our employees and their families may have encountered a financial burden which was onset by the shutdowns that were enforced by the government.
Throughout this episode, we will be discussing how stimulus packages and other financial assistance granted by the government will affect your 2020 taxes. We will also be having a conversation about how to recover from the financial difficulties of 2020 and what we can do now and in the future to avoid financial crisis when an emergency occurs in our lives. Now let's turn the time over to our TanaBell Chief Officer, Virgil Larson, to discuss taxes.
Hi, my name is Virgil Larson. I am the CFO for TanaBell Health Services. I also am a father. I have a large family, and I also have a tax practice that I've run for about 16 years to do individual and business taxes. So I was asked today just to kind of share some information with the crazy new tax world we live in that's constantly changing. And today is actually St. Patrick's Day. And so just as a reference, when you watch this, as things evolve, this is where things are at right now. And some stuff we'll talk about, you might want to check with whoever helps you do your taxes, your tax advisor, because of the dramatic changes that happened since last Friday, some of these issues are still evolving and have a potential to change. So some of these things are yes, some of these things are how it is right now. So just kind of watch for that and we'll adjust that. The first thing, which probably a lot of you have already noticed, I'm losing my notes so I get exact numbers, is the third round of the stimulus payments for the COVID relief package that was signed by the president on Friday the 12th. In that, it was a $1,400 per person stimulus that should go out. Again, it will be based on the information you provided in your 2019 tax return or your 2020 tax return. And we'll address that, a couple of the reasons why for that in a little bit. If you ended up owing tax, at this point, most of you have probably already got your first stimulus and your second stimulus. And so the government probably already has either a way to send you a gift card or direct deposit into your accounts. If for some reason you haven't, then that'd be something you'll want to go to the IRS website and you can enter your information so they can get your information, so hopefully get your stimulus money. Also, if you didn't receive your first or second stimulus, which was $1,200 a person and then $500 per child, and the second stimulus, which was $600 a person regardless of age, you can get that money still on your 2020 tax return when you fill that out, or if there's a change, if you had like a child. If in 2019, when I filed my taxes, it was just me and my husband, or me, or whatever, and then in 2020, I had a child, well, you would have only got the $1,200 originally, where you should have been able to get the extra $500 for that child, which they wouldn't have given you. Second round, I would have got $600 when I should have got $1,200. You can put that on that form, and then they'll include that in your tax return for 2020. So it's not like it's gone. It's actually, you can still get that. And then the same thing would be for this new round. If they don't know you have a kid, you're only going to get the amount that they do know. So that's another reason why filing your tax return will then inform them of what you should get, and they can usually make those corrections. With that said, again, it's $1,400. Real quick, some of the income limitations, because they've changed. So if you fall in this category, you may or may not get it. The upper thresholds for a single individual was $100,000. It's now $80,000. So if your adjusted gross income is $80,000 or above, and you're single, you're not going to get the $1,400. If your adjusted gross income is $160 for joint filers, 116 above, you're also not going to get it. Again, this would be something where if you fall in these categories, you should probably talk to your tax advisor, because there may be ways of what's included in your return, or if your kid's returns, do I claim my 19-year-old son at college? Do I not claim him? If you claim him, he's on your return and you're over 160, you're out, right? Or assuming you're talking married, filing a joint, you're out of the thing. Where it's like, no, I don't claim him. I'm over 160, but he only made $15,000. He's going to school. Well, let him claim himself. Then he would qualify for that $1,400. So there are some adjustments you can make on your tax returns in 2020 to kind of cope with this. It's frustrating because this came out, mid-March, when some people have already filed their taxes. The second piece that was part of this new legislation was the child tax credit. So if you don't have kids, you can take a nap for a minute. If you do have kids, then the tax credit was $2,000 per child, as long as you met the income threshold limitations. That has changed to, it's kind of a multi-tiered now. It's gone up to $3,000 per child, unless, so it's a $1,000 increase, unless your child is under age 6. And I always like how they word it. So basically your child has to be 5 or less at the end of 2021. If that's the case, their tax credit is $3,600, so $3,600. So if you're having kids this year, then it's a good year for you. If your child turns 6 at the end of the year, it's still good for you. You went from 2,000 to 3,000, right? So again, there are phase outs on that. They begin at $75,000 for single people and $150,000 for joint filers. If you're a joint filer or single and you are above that threshold, you still may be able to claim the original $2,000 tax credit, even if you're above that. So they phase out, but that's more complicated. We won't get into that, but that's something to look for. And the IRS they haven't come out exactly what their exact details are, but because they are raising the tax credit from $2,000 to $3,000 or $3,600 respectively, they're looking at the idea of beginning to send out those payments, again, based on your tax return that is filed, starting as early as July. So if you all of a sudden pull up your bank account in August and you're like, oh look, I have an extra $300 from the government. Well, you look at your return and say, oh, I have a kid. They must be paying me, and that's what it is. It's tax credits. The next section we're going to talk about is the change to unemployment benefits. Now, some of you who are with TanaBell or have been TanaBell for a long time, none of our buildings do we have to do any layoffs or unemployment, and that's a blessing to us and to you and to just our industry in general. So kudos to there. But you may have a spouse, a friend, a child who wasn't in this industry or wasn't as lucky, who did have unemployment for a time. And the frustration of this change is some of the uncertainty of it. Hopefully it's cleared up. The basis of it is unemployment benefits are taxable. It's like a wage you've been paid. That's how it's always been. When people receive this unemployment, some people didn't know that, or some people hadn't planned for that and didn't have any taxes withheld from your employment. You can have taxes withheld from unemployment, and this is important to note because this change is only for the 2020 tax year. It's already happened, so we're already out of that change. But the law that was signed retroactively applies to 2020. It does not apply to 2021, so the current year you're in. So in a way, it was like, okay, we'll forgive a little bit of it, but now you know, so plan ahead. Again, it's only for 2020. So if you know someone who is receiving unemployment that, and you're talking finances with them, you're in a position to help them that way, make sure to remind them this exclusion is only 2020, will not affect 2021. At 2021, when we do our taxes in 2022, looking forward, that income will be taxable to the Fed and you'll have an obligation to pay tax on that. So plan accordingly to that. a few other items with that and the changes. First, we didn't address earlier, but as far as tax documentation, W-2s, mortgage interest, investments, things like that, you should be receiving the first part of February. So if you haven't, which we're obviously past, if you haven't received your stuff by the first part of February, maybe the first week, maybe the first 2 weeks, then most likely something has gone wrong. You've moved, they had the wrong address. For TanaBell employees, which this is going out to, obviously your documentation for your W-2s are available in Paycor. You can log into Paycor and see your pay stubs anytime. You can see your W-2 anytime. You can print out a copy of your W-2 straight from Paycor. So you guys have that ability. For other tax documentation, you have to wait for it to show up or have online portals to receive that. The tax world, unfortunately, changes every year. There's lots of changes to it. So I am definitely pro people doing their own taxes, but either spend the time to research what you need to do, know someone that you can talk to at least point some of these things out for you, because there are lots of potential areas to miss refunds, income, credits, deductions that you just don't know about, that unfortunately if you don't file for them, they're not going to give them to you. Some that, like this new one with unemployment, obviously they've come out and said, yes, we'll fix that. But if some of these other ones, if you don't do, it's like if you have dependent care credit and you don't fill that part out, they're not going to come do that for you. And you just lost off on a potential, $1,200 of credits that you could have got that just disappear. So try to know the rules, know what you need to look for on your taxes. Don't put them off to the last minute, because that's when the mistakes are made and that's when people rush through things and just try to get stuff in. And good luck.
Thank you, Virgil, the cool accountant, for filling us all in on the continuing changes that we are seeing as we file our 2020 taxes. We would like to remind you all that the tax filing deadline has been extended to May 17th.
Next up, we're turning the time over to Kelly as she sits down with John Arvis, the Vice President of the Bank of Idaho, to discuss financial recovery and preparation for the future.
Well, I want to introduce John Arvis. John Arvis works with Bank of Idaho. He has been our banker for as long as I've been with TanaBell. We're going to start with our masks on so that you know that we've worn them here, but we're taking them off because both John and I have been vaccinated, and Morgan, our filmer, has been vaccinated, and we're far enough apart that we're feeling like we are observing
the 6 feet space. We're safe and doing everything we can.
We're safe and we're doing all that we need to do. John, let us know a little bit about your banking experience.
Sure, you bet. I actually started in the finance world as an investment advisor, and I wanted to be a research analyst, but I also wanted to stay in Pocatello because I love the area. I love Idaho and everything about it. So a research analyst wasn't in the cards. So I kind of punted from that career, landed in banking, and became a commercial lender, which has been great because it helps me analyze what a person's goals are for commercial lending, and I can help them see how to plan for it or kind of protect them at times from it, because sometimes people shoot for the moon and can't really reach for it. So it's kind of kept me in that analytical position. But I've been doing it for about 20 years now, been in the banking industry, and it's been great to help people out.
And you love it.
I do. I've really enjoyed it.
Good. You're working, you gotta love it. So we're gonna ask John some help to recover from 2020. So our first question is, 2020, that's all I'm gonna say, 2020. How can we start recovering from the impact that 2020 has had probably in many of our lives?
Sure. So the one good thing about living in Idaho is the majority of us, the vast majority of us, have weathered the storm better than the rest of the nation. Our unemployment has been lower, income levels have stayed more stable, and so we have weathered it better than most, but not everybody in Idaho has been that fortunate. Restaurant workers, cooks, things like that, they have been affected negatively at times. And so some of these stimulus packages have helped others and gotten them there, but some of us may have worked harder, and that's okay. We've been very fortunate in that respect. But if this has negatively affected you, I would say, coming out of this, you would want to look back and say, okay, how did things go during this pandemic? Were our finances sufficient? Did we have an emergency reserve that we could access? If you didn't and you're getting a stimulus check, maybe you put those in there to set that reserves up. Now, if you didn't have reserves, or if you did and you used them all up, but you're behind with your creditors now because your income decreased, then you'll want to use those stimulus checks or whatever funding you have to get those caught up and made current. That's the only way you're going to get through this, is staying current on all your bills. And then once you've become current, I would say what's best to do is to sit down, try to come up with a plan to where you can look at your wants and needs for expenses and cash. Excuse me. And then this way you can set up a plan and try to figure out where you can cut back on those expenses. And then you can utilize whatever excess funds you have there to build up a 3-month or a 6-month reserve to help you out with those what ifs and things that could happen to you unexpectedly.
So if we have our we all are getting most of us are getting a stimulus check. It's more important, you're saying, if we're behind on something, to pay up whatever we're behind on instead of putting it in savings. And then with what we have left, we can look at what we can put into savings.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
I would say yes, because another part of emergency reserves is if you don't have funding, you can use your credit cards on a short-term basis. Well, or if you can apply for loans to try to help you out. But if you're behind on your credit with your credit cards or your auto loans or anything like that, it definitely hurts your credit score, and it's going to make it harder for you to try to apply for funding in the future. It'll affect your plans for purchasing a car or trying to buy your first home. And so those you want to try to keep current, because that's going to help you out with your credit score, and in some essence, access to emergency funds if you needed it, albeit borrowed funds.
Okay, well, good. Okay, so look at what you had. Was it enough? Could you have done more? Did you go through it? Have you got any left? Look at the stimulus, look at what you owe, take care of what you owe, and then try and manage the rest of that,
Yep.
right?
Take advantage of what's at your disposal and use it appropriately.
Good. Okay, so what if 2020 or something like 2020 ever happens again? How can we be better prepared for that?
Right. And that's where the planning comes into play, where you want to sit down and you want to look at how much money you have coming in and how much money you have going out. And we all enjoy eating out. I think we've seen drive-thrus go through the roof with how people have been going to get food, because unfortunately eating at home can get old. It gets old preparing food all the time. So analyze your expenses, see where you're going and what you're doing. And if you're not living within your means, if you're spending as much as you're making or even a little bit more, look at those expenses and say, okay, could I eat out a little bit less? Could I forego a coffee in the morning and save that money?
Let me ask you something, because
Sure.
you said this at our run-through, and you said it now. When you say if you're spending as much as you're making, you're not living in your means, I find that interesting. So living in our means is actually spending less than what we're making,
Right.
correct?
Yep. You always want to spend less than you make and save some of that money so you can have a reserve that's there for you if something happens. And it makes it easier on you stress-wise. If you make $100,000 and you're spending $100,000, well, you don't have any money till your next paycheck. Well, if you're making $25,000, $30,000, but you're able to save $300, $400 a month, then you're also going to have something there. So if next month you have an emergency or something going on, you have some money that you've been able to save to help cover your hiney.
Because I'm thinking most people are thinking, well, I am living within my means because I'm only spending everything that I get.
Right.
But really, you're not really living within your means, because
not.
you're not planning for the future.
Yep.
You're overspending.
Yep, correct. Because we've always got things going on in the future. I mean, we always hope to make more in the future, but it doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes you start a new career, which means you may have been making $40,000, but to start that new career, you had to take a pay cut and go to $30,000. And so if you get comfortable at that $40,000 income level and you're going down to $30,000, well, it's awful hard to go back to that kind of style of living, because you're used to that higher style of living. And so it's always best to give yourself a cushion there, because it'll help you plan for retirement, plan for whatever financial goals you may have. It helps you set up an emergency reserve and maintain it. And then also just for the things that are unexpected that you may have happen.
And how much should we usually have in emergency reserve?
I think it's critical to have at least 3 months. Ideally, I like 6 months of what your gross monthly income is, because like this pandemic.
I don't have that.
Well, and a lot of us don't. A lot of us don't. It's a hard thing to do, and it's kind of nice to have though, because when this pandemic started, I think we all thought, oh, a few months we'll be out of it. Here we are a year later, and it's still affecting our everyday life and making things a little more difficult than what they would have been.
Well, yeah, and it's hard because you're not making a whole lot of money in savings.
No.
And so it's hard to just put it there and let it sit there.
It is.
In case.
Absolutely, and that's the hard part is the emergency reserves that you're setting, it's not really to get a return on your investment. It's there for the accidents, the car wrecks, the broken water heater, your child getting hurt or you getting hurt, or if you have to miss work because of an illness. So this way you've got a 3 to 6 month time horizon that you don't have to worry about your bills getting paid, because the funds in that reserve account are there for that.
The other thing I like that you said is you mentioned $100,000 or $30,000. It really doesn't matter how much money we make. Almost all of us will spend whatever it is we make,
right?
Doesn't it? I mean, isn't
Very
that
true.
kind of how it is?
Yep. And I've tried to hammer. When I was a kid, it was hammered home to me. It doesn't matter how much you make; it's how much you save. And so I've always tried to focus on that, and I've tried that with my kids too. My daughter, she's working, she gets $9-10 an hour, but she knows of that she's going to put away some of that savings for her college, for her car purchasing needs. And so this way she builds up a savings account and knows she's got some money in there.
The other thing I like you just said is you said she put some aside. You didn't say put X dollars or something percent aside. You said put some aside. How can we use that language?
Well, it would be great if we could all do a certain dollar figure, but somebody who's making $25,000, has rent, a car payment, insurance, they're not going to have a lot of discretionary income that they can just spend on whatever. And so your savings has to come from that source. You have to cover your present day needs. You have to cover your rent. You have to cover your utilities. And so once you've covered those expenses and you look at that and you see what money you have left over, you want to save some of that, but at the same time you want to have a little bit to live with, because we don't just...
So you're not saying save $10 or 50%. You're saying save some. You decide what that sum is for you.
Absolutely. Yep. And your plan will always change. You'll sit down and look at it and make adjustments. And as you get more comfortable doing that, you may up it or you may decrease it, just depending on your lifestyle. But then this way, you're always doing something to put something in reserves or into a plan.
You're keeping it in the forefront of your mind.
If you plan for it and you review it annually, it helps keep it, like you said, at the front of your mind, realizing, okay, do I really need to spend $200 on new skis or new poles or a wakeboard, anything like that? Instead, you'll say, no, I can save some of this instead, and know that in the future, I'm going to be better off for it. So by reviewing that plan, it keeps it in front of your mind and helps it keep it there. And then I would also stress to, two heads are always better than one. Start somewhere. If you want to talk to someone, if you're not sure, talk to your banker, talk to an investment advisor, a CPA, or a friend that you trust. Have them sit down with you and review these things, because sometimes we skew our own thoughts. We sometimes think our wants are needs when they really aren't, and getting someone else's input may help you plan that better.
Oh, if you see something that you want, and then you want a little bit more, and then you might sort of need it, and then you absolutely need it, and that happens all the time across the board with everybody.
Oh, absolutely.
With different things.
Yeah, and by using another person, it may actually help you find ways to save money, because maybe you have a credit card that you didn't realize you're paying a high interest on, and that other person can tell you, look at doing a debt consolidation, and maybe you can save some money that way. So getting input from somebody else is always a good thing to do, just because they have an outside view from where you're sitting.
Okay, and you said do that annually.
I would say annually.
Yeah.
At least, just because it helps keep, like you said, keep it in the front of your mind and focus on what you're trying to do and why. Trying to buy a new car, well, I think we all know that none of those have gone very cheap either. Mm-hmm. And so the savings or the amount you need to have to come up with that down payment, all that will do is help also decrease what you're going to pay for it in the future too.
Right, right. Any last parting words of wisdom, John Arvis?
The only thing I would say, like we've hammered home here today, is plan, review it annually, and live within your means. I've actually seen physicians who make $250,000 a year, but they have very little money in their savings accounts. And albeit a lot of us can't fathom how they can't do that, but they get comfortable having that big lifestyle. So even if you're making $25,000, try to save a little bit. Find a level that's comfortable for you, and then every year revisit that and try to up that if you can, just because it's going to benefit you in the long run.
Okay. Thank you, John. We appreciate you taking time. We know your life has been busy.
Absolutely.
So we appreciate it.
We all are. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, John and Kelly. If any of our employees are interested in opening a new emergency fund account, reach out to the Bank of Idaho and they will happily assist you.
Now for our Spotlight of Joy this month, we would like to make an official announcement to congratulate our 2 TanaBell Employees of the Year for 2020. Each year, employees are nominated by our executive directors at each facility. Then the nominations are evaluated, and our CEO, Troy Bell, has the pleasure of presenting the awards to the winning employees.
This year, our Assisted Living Employee of the Year award winner is Jessica Hogan. She is a CNA and house manager at Tambry Meadows Assisted Living in Idaho Falls. We appreciate all that Jessica does in upholding TanaBell's values as she serves the residents at Tambry Meadows. Congratulations, Jessica.
Our Skilled Nursing Employee of the Year award winner is Jessica Mendoza. She is a cook at Quinn Meadows Rehabilitation and Care Center in Pocatello. We appreciate Jessica's dedication to providing quality food and service to all of our Quinn Meadows patients and residents. Congratulations, Jessica.
Next month, for our Joy Spotlight in the May Wellness Magazine, we will be featuring photos of our employees' pets. If you would like to see your pet featured in next month's magazine, please send a photo with their name to morgan.nally@tanabell.com.
Thanks for watching, and we hope you focus on your finances this month and work to increase your preparedness for future financial emergencies. As always, we would like to encourage each of you to complete the quiz that is associated with this video. Those of you who do so will earn a TBWP Wellness Prize.